News now begins in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, where the Nigerian Economic Summit group opened its 30th annual conference in Abuja, calling for unified action to tackle the nation's pressing socio-economic challenges. With the theme, Collaborative Action for Growth, Competitiveness and Stability, the events gathered key figures from government, the private sector, and international community to chart a path for Nigeria's economic future. News Central's Chidimma Onah provides more in this report.
For over 3 decades, the Nigerian Economic Summit has provided a platform for dialogue, policy making and strategic collaboration aimed at fostering Nigeria's economic development. In his remark, Niyi Yusuf, chairman of the NESG, highlights some challenges preventing Nigeria from reaching its full economic potential and stressed the need for reforms that could break the country's stagnation and pave the way for sustainable growth.
Nigeria has experienced 2 recessions in the past decade, each exposing deep-rooted structural vulnerabilities that must be addressed with renewed urgency. Hence, today's challenges demand a new approach centered on collaboration to promote growth, competitiveness, and stability.
Praising the NESG for its ongoing role in shaping policy dialogue, the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Atiku Bagudu, emphasizes the significant achievements the NES has made over the years in facilitating constructive dialogue and policy formulation.
Mr. President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this summit has over the years played a pivotal role in the sustenance of our national dialogue on the economy and frame our deliberations within the context of the aspirations for a better quality life for our people. It discusses our vision of equity and social justice, the enviable economic and political order we are committed to creating, and forms the basis for forging consensus by promoting and sustaining cooperation between the public and private sector.
A major concern in Nigeria today is inflation. The rising cost of living has had a severe impact on the poorest citizens, particularly the youth who are finding it increasingly difficult to achieve their full potential. The senior vice president of the World Bank Group underscores the need for better economic management, particularly in key sectors like oil, which has been poorly managed, contributing to Nigeria's economic decline.
Africa goes as Nigeria goes. So given its size and significance, and the success of Nigeria's reforms that are happening today will give a big boost to countries across the continent. There is a lot of suffering in all sections in all parts of Nigerian society, but especially among the poor and the young. They want good schools, they want decent colleges, they want decent healthcare, good jobs, and safe conditions that allow them to use this potential.
Before declaring the summit open, Vice President Kasim Shettima calls for prioritizing economic diversification as a means to promote sustainable growth.
Nigeria's growth trajectory has been volatile, heavily dependent on oil revenues and unable to create enough jobs to keep pace with our rapidly growing population. As a nation, we must prioritize economic diversification. Our objective is to ensure that the Nigerian economy is inclusive, where small and medium-sized enterprises can thrive alongside large corporations, and where every citizen, regardless of location or background, can benefit from economic opportunities.
The first day of the 3-day Nigerian Economic Summit offered not only an in-depth assessment of the country's current state, but also a vision for a more diversified economy. The takeaway is that with the right policies in place, Nigeria can set itself on a course towards lasting growth and stability. In Lagos for News Central, I am Chidimma Onah.
Meanwhile, Nigeria's federal government says that it is building a framework to ensure tax compliance amongst businesses and corporations as part of its fiscal reforms. The chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms made this known at the sidelines of the ongoing 30th Nigerian Economic Summit held in the nation's capital, Abuja. News Central's Imarayi has more in this report.
The engagement is the Fiscal and Monetary Policy Reform Workshop, which was held on the sidelines of the 30th Nigerian Economic Summit. The workshop, with the theme Removing Barriers in Private Sector Investment, saw the convergence of senior officials in Nigeria's financial sector. The chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform says that efforts are being made to ensure maximum tax compliance among businesses.
The way we are developing the system, we will use a primary data identification, which is NIN for individuals. We'll use your RC number with CAC for businesses. We're developing one for government corporations doing business. Everything you do that is an economic activity will be linked to that data, that ID. When you declare your income and you say you've earned 2 million naira in a year, the system will say, how did you earn 2 million and you spent 40 million?
The chairman also announced during the workshop that from January 2025, Nigeria's wealthiest citizens will be subject to a personal income tax of about 25%.
If you earn 1.5 million naira a month or less, your personal income tax bill will go down. Of course, at the lower end, completely exempted. But if you earn more than that amount, you see it going up incrementally up to 25%. Today, if you earn 100 million naira a month, nobody hits 19% effective personal income tax rate. We're taking that up to 25%.
The Central Bank of Nigeria also asked that it is employing all strategies to tame inflation, assuring that no stone will be left unturned.
We are tightening the contractionary policy. That's what we're doing. That is, we want to make sure as much as possible we reduce money supply and circulation, because we know there is a positive correlation between money supply and the rate of inflation. So if we say we are trying to fight inflation, to rein inflation, you have to be conscious of the quantum of money supply and circulation.
The chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform says that the bill proposing an increase in the value-added tax from 7.5% to 10% is already before the National Assembly for consideration. He adds that if considered, the increase will be implemented by January 2025. In Abuja for News Central, I am Joshua Imarayi.
News Central's business correspondent, Perpetua Fasumi Peter, now joins me on the news to give us an update on the ongoing summit. Perpetua, it's nice to see you. Of course, let's have an understanding of course, what the discussions are today. We start from there and what people are to expect.
Today, there is a lineup of conversations, but I'd like to just say that from the opening session we had yesterday, there have been a lot of conversations around the opening session, whether it is the statement of, the senior vice president of the World Bank Group, who was actually representing, the president of the World Bank Group. He talked about something, saying that it will take Nigeria 10 to 15 years, to stay on the course of these reforms before we can begin to see the impact on the economy and the people. That has generated a lot of controversies and conversations. The moment he said it, there was an uproar in the hall, and he had to wait for a moment to catch his breath before even continuing. And apart from that, we also had the Vice President, Chidimma, who was also representing the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who was also talking. And while he was talking, he sort of felt like he was singing, the praise of the government, saying that how their reforms have been able to, change a lot of things, saying that the balance of trade and all of that, things are getting better, we're getting more FDIs and all of that. That, of course, also corroborates what the Minister for Budget and Economic Planning was saying. However, the Vice President said something that also has been making the rounds, and that, of course, is that the city of Chicago, that Nigeria is even more safe than the city of Chicago. That, of course, has caused some, uproar and all of that. But basically, let's go to what we are having today. For today, there are a couple of sessions, but one of them that is quite interesting for me is the one on fiscal reforms, fiscal and economic reforms, and that's because we're having coordinating Minister of the Economy, Minister of Finance and coordinating Minister of the Economy. He will be on that panel, and so many Nigerians would really be eager to hear what he has to say. He's not the only one. We also have NG Ayuk, who will also be on that particular panel, and that's one. And there is another panel that is on oil and gas, and I tell you what, Nigerians cannot wait to hear what Mele Kyari has to say, because Mele Kyari is going to be on that panel. So, I mean, some interesting conversations that Nigerians are waiting to see, because when we talk about Nigeria right now, the oil and gas sector is one sector that, it's always on the front burner, because there is one story or the other coming from that sector. And talking about economic reforms, of course, we know the economic reforms are the stuff that have brought us where we are today, where we're saying that consumers are beginning to lose monies from their wallets. Well, let me bring in Wilson. He is the chief economist at NESG. I'd like him to, join us and, talk to us about this. Hello, Wilson. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so looking at the conversation since yesterday, what do you make of them? Does it seem to you like maybe there is a disconnect between what the everyday Nigerian is experiencing and what the leaders are saying? Looking at, some of the figures they were reading out yesterday, but your own, your own CEO said something that, we need more transparency from the government. We need the government to also begin to show us that they're also tightening their belts, even as they tell Nigerians to tighten their belts. It seems that the government is missing that point. What do you make of yesterday's conversations?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I think it was an interesting conversation, especially when you look at the different perspectives. So there are those that believe that, from the presidency side, that, they're trying to do things well, they're trying to manage the economy much better. There are the views of those on the private sector side that, feel like a lot more can still be done. And, when you talk about Nigeria's economy from a broad macro perspective, we're still talking about growth rate at 3%. We're talking about inflation at 32%. Exchange rate still around 1,650 and thereabout. And these are critical issues that affect the lives of the everyday Nigerian. And I think what I see from the discussion is there was a lot of admittance to the fact that things are not going well with Nigeria.
Admittance from where? From the government? Because I don't think I heard that. We only heard, we empathize with you, but that was all. They kept reeling out things, talking about, the GDP growing from 2.9 to 3 point something. That's not what we're talking about, is it?
Yes, so the admittance was from, if you listen to the chairman's speech, right, he clearly stated that this is where we are as a country. We have no business, being at having growth rate of 3%, as giving Nigeria's huge potential. Inflation is pushing many people, into poverty. So if you listen to the panel before the one before the World Bank, the vice president of the World Bank, some of the panelists reeled out certain things that, look, government is asking us to cut costs, inflation and all that, subsidy removal affecting people's income. But then we'll still see the government spending as if everything is fine. We're talking about cost of governance, we're talking about efficiency of spending, which I think it's something we've not really done well, and we need to do well. So the admittance was on some of the panelists and even the chairman's speech. But then, of course, what do you expect? Government will always say they're trying, but from my own perspective, I think they can do a lot more better to impact the lives of the average Nigerians positively.
All right, there is another one, another thing yesterday. That was the statement from the senior vice president of World Bank, saying we would need to stay 10 to 15 years on the course for us to see changes. What do you make of that as an economist?
What I see with Nigeria, I think 10 to 15 years of high inflation, 10 to 15 years of rising unemployment. I'm not sure. I think perhaps he's speaking from a reforms perspective to say that, some of these reforms that have been made in terms of stabilizing exchange rates in a way, and perhaps also trying to see how they can remove subsidies so that we can have a fair market system. I think probably that's where he's coming from. But looking at all of the macro indicators, to be honest, I think we need to move faster. We need to also have in mind that as much as we are looking out for foreign investment into Nigeria, we should not cripple what we have locally. Right now, interest rates are around over 30% or thereabout. I don't think we can grow or develop or move to the next stage of development with that kind of interest rate. It's not happening. How do businesses get funding at 30%? What are you selling? We're talking about how inflation itself is not just a problem for the masses like we always see. Even for businesses, real returns right now are negative. If you invest, 1 year investment, you're getting something around 23% or thereabout. Inflation is 32%, so it's still below inflation. And my problem here, usually with all of the prescriptions we've seen, is that we target so much about raising interest rates to catch up with inflation, but the real problem should be, or the real solution should be, that get that inflation down so that real interest rate can be positive. And so that means looking at all of the structural bottlenecks, and it was clearly, discussed yesterday, all of the issues affecting agricultural productivity, all of the issues affecting access to credit for small, micro, and medium-sized businesses, all of the issues of insecurity that people need to farm and be able to produce goods. How do we attract, mechanization into agriculture so that we can raise productivity of the sector? Right now, many of our goods are still being lost, and we're talking about, post-harvest losses that are huge across different, crops, and those are critical issues that I think we need to focus on rather than interest rate trying to catch up with inflation. If inflation keeps going to 50%, are we going to raise rate to 50%? So I think the focus should be more on bringing down inflation, and to a reasonable level. And there's a point I think I need to make, perhaps before you ask your next question, that when inflation rate declines, it doesn't mean prices have dropped. So it just means that the rate of increase in price has slowed. So it increased by perhaps 32% last month. The month before it was 33%, but there's still an increase. So I think bringing it down significantly, it's not a matter of using just interest rate. It has to be a collaborative effort between fiscal and monetary policies. And more importantly, and even interestingly, that's the theme of the summit: collaborative action for growth, stability, and competitiveness.
Well, that's quite interesting. I like how you brought me to the fiscal authority, because they've been doing a lot of things on their own part, whether it is the economic stabilization bills, which of course stems from the ASAP recommendations, or even, some other things, whether it's the withholding tax, the new withholding tax regime, or the modification of VAT. So talk to me. Do you think these things will also help in, crashing the bad or uninteresting, unfavorable macroeconomic numbers?
Well, I think they will have some impact. The impact, of course, we may not be too clear on that, but I think the goal of these bills, the economic stabilization bill, part of it is to bring, ease to businesses. So it's almost like an ease of doing business bill in a way, focusing more on the tax angle. And I think Mr. Taiwo Oyedele has, done some tremendous work in the last 1 year plus that he's been at the helm of affairs of the tax system. But what I say also is that for this,
in less than 30 seconds, so we can end this.
Yeah, for the small, medium-sized businesses, there are still issues of multiple taxes. They still pay lots of numerous taxes. So when you leave Abuja and leave the Transcorp and you go to these businesses, you see that they have different taxes from local government, from non-state actors, and all of those. I think that's where the reform should go to see how you can ease the business, ease doing business for those small, medium-sized entrepreneurs.
All right, thank you so much, Wilson.
Yeah.
That's very insightful comments and interview session. You're watching News Central now. We go on a short break, and when we return, we'll tell you about Kogi State. The state is seeking urgent aid as floods is set to have displaced over 200 communities. We'll bring you more details when we return. Let's now tell you that stakeholders in Plateau State say all hands need to be put on deck to mitigate against climate change and disasters in communities for the benefit of future generations. This was made known at an event organized by the National Emergency Management Agency in collaboration with the Center for Gospel Health and Development in Jos to mark this year's International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction. Chizoba was there for News Central and our reports.
Climate change, with its effects experienced by many people in many different ways in our world today, is a wake-up call on all and sundry to ensure we engage in activities that will reduce disasters in our communities. To mark the 2024 International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction, NEMA, in conjunction with SIGAD, began with a roadwork to sensitize the public on the need to have a safer society devoid of disasters.
We just felt it very important to gather these students and other of our stakeholders to also sensitize them and to even also advocate to them in respect to the climate change as we have globally, and also to see how we can have an interface with them, to also how to train them again on all these aspects.
You know, there's a concern that with the way we're going, we'll need to prepare the communities, we need to prepare our societies to protect the future generation.
Floods, erosion, deforestation, global warming, and fire outbreaks, among others, are reasons for urgent action against these natural and man-made disasters. With stakeholders here seeing the need to contribute to disaster risk reduction, every other citizen is challenged to do more.
I'll clear the drainages and also educate my fellow individuals on how to address the issue of environmental disasters.
And I would like to educate some of my fellow mates about these disasters which are happening to us and how to prevent them.
The government should put on efforts and encourage we people that are doing this thing so that we have more strength to do more than this.
It has made us more aware of why we need disaster management in our lives, because we don't have to wait for disasters to happen before we know how to tackle them.
We'll definitely take the information back to the community and educate our people the more, giving them the awareness and add to what we've known in order to improve the management on disaster.
The theme for this year's celebration is empowering the next generation for a resilient future. Education remains key. In Jos for New Central, Chizoba and Nyowe.
Well, I'll tell you that the Kogi State government has once again appealed to the federal government and international donor agencies for urgent assistance as devastating floods have displaced over 200 communities in the state. Addressing journalists in Koton Karfe on Monday, the State Commissioner for Information and Communications, Honorable Kingsley Fanwo, warned that the state is on the brink of a major humanitarian crisis with nearly 2 million people left homeless by the flood. Fanwo urged the National Emergency Management Agency to act swiftly, stating that Kogi State is already overwhelmed by the disaster. The hardest hit areas include Lokoja, Adavi, Ofu, Ajakuta, Ida, and Ibaji local government areas.
For the past 10 to 15 years now, we are suffering a lot of hardship. Apart from that, the water has been disturbing every community. Like me, as I'm talking to right now, I have a house in this place, built. The one at the back of me now is my house. And for the past 4 or 5 years, water has been disturbing us frequently. We'll go, we'll come back. As it is now, we have nowhere to even go to now.
This fraud will come always year by year. It will spoil something for this our area. We need the local government help to help us.
We were sleeping in the night. That the next thing we see is what my son. It was my son that wake up to go and ease himself, and he discovered that the water will take over the house and everywhere was filled up.
And now to health matters. Public health experts have become increasingly alarmed about the continued waning of public confidence in vaccines. It is on this note that the Lagos State government, through its Ministry of Information and Strategy, in collaboration with UNICEF, organized a media sensitization program to create awareness of the forthcoming vaccination program in the state. News Central's Omolola Ololade brings us more in this report.
The recent outbreaks of different diseases in Nigeria, such as yellow fever, measles, diphtheria, and more recently, cholera, are becoming increasingly worrisome. Hence, the need for high levels of immunization coverage in the country. The Lagos State Ministry of Information and Strategy, in collaboration with UNICEF, organized a media orientation on non-polio supplementary immunization activities to create more awareness and increase sensitization on the forthcoming immunization exercise in the state.
Process itself commences on the 19th of October 2024, and it's going to be initially for the first 2 weeks, and then we will assess and see what our coverage is like. We are expected to have at least 95% coverage. It will be available in all our PHCs. We'll take it to where we know that people are going to congregate. We'll take it to churches. We'll take it to mosques. We'll take it to motor parks. We'll take it to schools. We'll take it everywhere as long as we know that people are going to congregate.
We have engaged every aspect of the community. So for once, we started planning from the bottom all the way to the top, rather than doing it from the top to the bottom. So engagement actually started from the ward level. We started engaging all the CDAs, all the CDCs. We've engaged all the religious bodies at the ward level, at the local government level, and at the state level. Because at the end of the day, you can only gain acceptance when you have the buy-in of the gatekeepers of the communities.
However, demystifying the myths and misconceptions about childhood vaccines plays a pivotal role in closing the gap in vaccine equity while increasing vaccine trust amongst the populace.
In vaccine trust acceptance, owing to a lot of rumors being populated. And so we need a channel where people, as much as they hear the rumors, they also combat those rumors through trusted platforms. And that is why this meeting has been called, because we realize that the media is a voice that reaches the voiceless and a platform to reach many. Hence the reason for this meeting. We want to gain allies from media practitioners to help us use their platforms, their channels and their network to increase vaccine safety, to increase vaccine trust and acceptance.
Health experts therefore believe in the transformative power of harnessing the media as part of a broad public health approach to promote vaccine confidence, hence the need for media campaigns and sensitization programs in various parts of the country. In Lagos, for News Central, I am Omolola Ololade.
Abia State government says it has been able to contain the spread of some communicable diseases ravaging parts of the country. Commissioner for Information Kano told journalists in Umuahia on Monday that the state government was able to record the achievement through dedication and commitment to the well-being of the citizens. He said for this reason, the state does not have any current case of cholera, diphtheria, or Lassa fever.
I want to report that as at date, Abia State is free from any new cases of cholera, Lassa fever, diphtheria, and mpox. And what that speaks to is the fact that our State Minister of Health are alive to their duties, working around the clock to ensure that Abians.
Away from health now to education, Nigeria's federal government says that it is set to commence the implementation of a new school curriculum that will ensure learners from primary school level to junior secondary school level graduate with at least 2 skills that will be relevant to their livelihoods. Nigeria's Minister of Education, while speaking to newsmen in Abuja, says that the curriculum, which will take effect from January 2025, will equip young Nigerians with skills from the basic education level. Our correspondent, Idong Joseph, completes the report.
Since the introduction of the revised 9-year basic education curriculum in 2012, followed by its implementation 2 years later in 2014, the existing curriculum for basic level education in Nigeria seems to be outdated. This is because many believe it has left learners ill-prepared for the challenges of life, denying them the capacity to take advantage of the opportunities that lie before them in today's world. Recognizing the critical need for curriculum reform, Nigeria's Education Minister reveals that in the last 12 months, the government has been working with stakeholders to design a new curriculum that injects relevant skills into the nation's basic education system.
Students should be able to finish school with at least minimum of 2 skills so that they can have a very productive life. So that curriculum, the basis for that curriculum is the National Skills Framework, and it has been approved. And then we said also that what was approved was for the basic education. What is ready is for the basic education. We have set a timeline for implementation.
The new curriculum contains 15 new subjects around basic digital literacy, building and construction, events management, as well as agriculture and processing. He says that the curriculum will affect public and private schools to ensure they join learners in the developed world to become employers.
Right now, part of the problem why schooling has become unattractive because people finish and there's no change in their life. No change. They cannot be employed, they can't do anything on their own. So parents question the value of why are we spending money to send people to school. Now it's going to change that game.
While stating that work is ongoing to commence the implementation of the new curriculum in January next year, Nigeria's Minister of Education says that the senior secondary school curriculum is also currently being reviewed. In Abuja for News Central, I am Idong Joseph.
Coming up on the news. Let's now tell you that members of SCHI, the now suspended School and Student Federation, have been arrested by authorities in Côte d'Ivoire in a murder investigation after 2 people, including its leader's main rival, were found dead. The powerful group has been accused of sowing terror in Abidjan, in the Abidjan University campuses for years.
Ici sur le campus de Cocody, il est clairement visible. Elle règne en maître absolu, elle est seule. Donc elle ne permet pas aux autres organisations, en tout cas, de pouvoir s'exprimer clairement sur le campus. Elle règne rien que par les actes de violence. On empêche les autres de s'exprimer, vous voulez prendre la parole, en tout cas, vous prononcez au sein du campus, mais ils vont venir, bon, ces membres vont venir, et puis bon, pour vous arracher le micro, ils vont vous, en tout cas, vous torturer. Et ces cas sont légion. Ces cas sont légion. Donc quand c'est comme ça fait peur aux autres organisations qui refusent en tout cas de pouvoir venir sur le campus et pouvoir s'exprimer. Vous faites une réunion, on vous empêche de tenir la réunion.
Human Rights Watch has accused Rwandan authorities of perpetrating serious human rights abuses in detention facilities, including torturing inmates, denouncing a lack of accountability for those responsible. According to the group, political dissent and free speech have been crushed under President Paul Kagame's 3-decade rule, with international campaigners long decrying the shrinking civil rights space in the East African country. HRW's report is based on interviews between 2019 and 2024 with almost 30 people, including former inmates, as well as court documents and interviews shared online. The organization said it contacted the government in September over the report's findings, but is yet to receive a response. And from the east to the southern part of Africa, South Africans are losing hope that there will be any justice for the family of the slain Orlando Pirates and Bafana star Senzo Meyiwa, who was gunned down at his then-girlfriend's house in Vuslerus in 2014. Proceedings in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial were postponed once again on Monday as the state could not secure the attendance of its witness, lead investigator Brigadier Bongani Gininda. Meanwhile, 2 of the accused complain about their conditions in prison and want the court to do something. Now, in Northern Africa, A bus crashed on a highway in Egypt on Monday, killing 12 people and injuring 33 others. The bus was carrying commuting college students home from Galala University in Egypt's Eastern Suez Governorate when it flipped on the highway. No other vehicle was involved in the accident, and investigations were underway to determine the reason for the crash. The Health Ministry said the injured were transferred to a nearby hospital, from which 19 were discharged. Road accidents are common in Egypt, where drivers often disregard traffic rules and many roads are in bad repair. Official figures say more than 5,600 people were killed in road accidents in 2023 in the country. And now we go back to the Senzo Meyiwa's case, where it seems as though families are losing hope over the possibility of justice being granted to his family. And joining us now to discuss further on this is an attorney with the University of Johannesburg's Law Clinic, Elton Hart. Elton, thank you so much for joining us. Now, what fuels South Africa's frustration with the Senzo Meyiwa trial delays? And what does this say about public trust in the judiciary?
No, indeed, it creates a lot of problems that people feel that justice delayed is justice denied, the old saying. But also, it gives a sense of that people do not really want to follow as to what is happening with this trial, because everything is dragged out, but also they feel like certain privileges is being extended to certain individuals or witnesses. And on the other hand, you would have that the accused persons is sort of half treated under a heavy hand. But when it comes to the state and the delays that is predominantly occasioned by the state of not lining up the witnesses, it's treated a little bit more softer by the presiding officer. And that is the sentiment that some of the people feel like they don't think that these guys that's currently on trial for the murder of the Bafana soccer star is being treated fairly, and they're getting a fair hearing. That's the sentiment of the South African looking at our social media platforms and the word on the street as to how they view and what's their view on the current trend in this case.
Okay, so to be very honest, will the Meyiwa family actually find justice? Because a couple of South Africans who are concerned about this are saying that evidences are there that it was clearly murdered.
No, if one looks at it, and this is now, if you look at it from a legal perspective and through a legal lens, you can see there's a lot of questionable things that happened in the investigation. And the first thing is the tampering that happened with the crime scene. The crime scene was tampered with, it was clean. So do you take the evidence that was presented by the state as the best available evidence and actually the evidence that reflects what happened on that crime scene? No, I don't think so. Then you look at also the types of witnesses that the state is bringing to the fore. Some of these witnesses are sort of half contradicting what the other ones are saying. And even when you talk about the ballistics experts, the evidence of the ballistics experts, and I think if I was the presiding officer, I would look at it very, very sort of half carefully, because the one talks about there is sufficient marks, the other one says there's not sufficient marks, and there's already a question of doubt that arises there. And we know criminal court, you need to be beyond reasonable doubt. And I think the evidence presented by the state at this point in time doesn't prove beyond reasonable doubt that the guys that is currently before court actually committed the crime. Maybe they might knew or they had knowledge of who was involved in the commission of the crime, but I don't think, and that is my personal opinion, looking at the facts that was currently presented and the evidence is currently presented, that these guys is not the 5 guys that actually killed our Bafana goalkeeper. There's somebody else that was involved in leading to the death of Senzo Meyiwa, and they are currently not before court.
Well, it's been since 2014. We don't know for how long this case will drag, but then we'll keep our eyes on it to see if justice will eventually be served. Elton Hart, thank you so much for your time.
No, indeed, thank you.
Away from the shores of Africa and talking about the coming U.S. election, U.S. Vice President and Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris has warned American voters against a second Trump term, citing his threats to the use of the U.S. military against the enemy within, including left-wingers. Harris stated this at a campaign rally in Erie, Pennsylvania, a crucial state to win the presidential election.
I believe so strongly that a second Trump term would be a huge risk for America and dangerous. Donald Trump is increasingly unstable and unhinged. So all of this is to say, I will always put the middle class and working families first. I come from the middle class, and I will never forget where I come from. Never forget where I come from. Never.
Straight to sports, the Libyan Football Federation has condemned Nigeria's decision to withdraw from the scheduled 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier, threatening to take legal action to protect its national team's interests. The Super Eagles cited safety concerns after being stranded at Al Abak Airport for over 13 hours following an unexpected diversion on Sunday, prompting Nigeria to pull out of the match, initially set for Tuesday, October 15. In its statement, the LFF accused the Nigerian Football Federation of failing to cooperate in organizing the match and causing the confusion that led to the current situation. The statement further offered an apology to Libyan football fans for the confusion and delays in the match arrangement, attributing these issues to the Nigerian Football Federation's actions. Meanwhile, Nigeria and Egypt emerged victorious in the team events at the 2024 ITTF Africa Championships held in Addis Ababa on Monday. In the men's event, Nigeria faced Algeria in the thrilling final, where Olajide Omotayo battled Sami Keruf in the match, where Keruf secured a 3-2 victory, giving Algeria a 1-0 lead. Quadri Aruna then defeated Milane Jalili 3-1 to score for Nigeria. Matthew Kuti showcased his dominance by defeating Mahideen Bella 3-0, putting Nigeria ahead 2-1. In the decisive match, Aruna overcame Keruf, sealing Nigeria's 3-1 triumph and crowning them the new African champions. In the women's event, the Egyptian trio of Hannah Goda, Yusra Helmi and Mariam Al-Dabi defeated Nigeria's Ajoke Jomo, Fatima Bello and Hope Udoaka, securing Egypt's 3-0 win. Now, Paul George, the 9-time NBA star who joined Philadelphia as a free agent in the off-season, hyperextended his left knee in a preseason victory over the Atlanta Hawks. George was guarding Atlanta's Jalen Johnson in the first half when he appeared to plant his leg awkwardly. He played no further part after having scored 8 points on 3 of 5 shooting with 2 rebounds, 1 assist and 1 steal in just over 12 minutes on court. George told the Philadelphia Inquirer that he felt the hyperextension and knew he needed to have the knee examined, but he was not too concerned about it. And that's all at this hour, but before we go, we look at our top stories again. Federal government moves to optimize Nigeria's tax compliance with businesses. Authorities in Côte d'Ivoire suspend student organization over murder probe. We also told you that 12 college students killed in fatal bus crash in Egypt. Or you can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times, channel 274, Avo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Lekan Onabanjo.